And before I introduce Andrew, the standard, I'll get Prof to talk a little bit about why we decided to do this series.
Well, I think by now everyone in the audience pretty much has seen at least one of the episodes. And 3 weeks ago, exactly 3 weeks ago, Freda and I were exchanging some very quick messages of just checking in and seeing how everyone is doing. And we said, you know, we have so many interesting things to say about that. Why don't we share this with the world? And we were thinking a little bit about what should this be and how should we call it. And then we realized that the truth is in front of us. The obvious truth is in front of us. Both of us are very outspoken. So this is going to be an outspoken series. And then we like to talk about simply hard topics. And today we're going to talk about typecast. Last week we talked about guilt. We talked about
being bold.
Exactly.
Being bold. Yeah.
Last episode of this mini series, we're going to talk about hustling. So we just wanted to have a little bit of a non-COVID related conversation. Obviously, some of the narrative might go into that, but actually we want to be outspoken about simply hard topics and give everybody a 30-minute guilt-free Friday chat with us.
Okay, I'd like to welcome our guest, Andrew Bryant, who's the founder of Self-Leadership. What? Okay. Anyway, thanks for being with us. Andrew, I've interviewed him a couple of years ago. And the reason why we got him here is this conversation about typecasts and stereotypes. And actually, that was what got Prof and I started on it as well, about the stereotypes that we face. And I remembered Andrew saying many years ago that he wouldn't be on a panel session if there wasn't a woman in the panel session. It's like, wow, a little thing like that, which was an aha moment for me, right? Where we get into this unconscious bias, which I'm sure we'll discuss. So welcome, Andrew. You know, and so we want to get straight into this whole question. We'll show you some of the questions that we're going to go through, and then feel free. We have some questions already, very interesting. Andrew will be answering one of them. Okay, I think we want to start off maybe with the experience of with being typecast yourself, earliest memories, or even today on you know, being typecast, right? One of the things that I want to bring up, and before I get the others to speak, was you know, I do get interviews, right? And when I get interviewed, it's always the question that's posed to me as a woman, and then as a single mother: how do you juggle? How do you struggle? Or even if I wasn't a single mother, right? But these are the words struggle and juggle is always posed to a woman, and I don't think Andrew has ever been asked that question. Right? And it's usually, these questions are usually from women asking me about the juggle and the struggle. And I don't feel that I have obstacles, I have challenges just like everybody else, but this whole thing about juggling and struggling seems to be, you know, geared towards a woman, right? Andrew or Prof, you want to add to that?
Why don't we start with Andrew? I was just texting a few people who are trying to get in. You don't need a password if you're trying to get in, but just in case you do, text me. So Andrew, why don't we start with you?
Okay, well, I mean, what's the question? Have I ever been asked, do I juggle? I'm often asked how I'm so productive. I think the first question really is, what is your experience of being typecast? Now, obviously, I'm an older, white, educated male, so you know, I'm steeped in so much positive bias, but I have experienced the negative bias in being typecast. So I'm English by birth, I'm Australian by passport, I'm Singaporean by residence, and I'm a Brazilian by wife. So I'm truly multicultural. My children from a previous marriage are Sino-Kadazan Caucasian. So I was a single dad for a period of time. And so I did juggle. And I at least empathize with that. And I'm on the faculty of Women in Leadership at Singapore Management University. And I do coach women to step up and present. And so I'm very aware that they get typecast, which is why I felt that the best thing I could do for diversity and inclusion is to say, I'm going to make a stand. I won't promote exclusion, particularly in terms of gender. So I try as much as I can to be inclusive. That doesn't mean I succeed all the time, but I attempt to be inclusive. My first experience of being typecast is my first degree. So I went to an English grammar school. I was a straight A student in sciences. I was destined to do medicine, to become a doctor. And then the government in its wisdom merged my boys' grammar school with the girls' high school. And to cut a long story short, I was distracted. And I didn't get the grades to get into medicine. And my second choice was physiotherapy. So in 1982, I graduated as a physiotherapist. As an undergraduate, there were 28 women on the course and 3 men. And of one of those we weren't sure about. So I experienced being the minority in terms of my own profession. They expected the physiotherapists to be women. And so I did experience a little bit of biased and typecasting then, but I'll stop talking and leave that for you to interject and interrogate as you so wish.
Freda, why are we having this chat? Why is the reason we're talking about typecast today? Do you remember the first interactions that the two of us ever had?
Yeah, I think we were just, oh no, this is the first time I met Prof. And I saw this woman, said she's a professor. Right? I mean, but I just felt really enlightened by it, because there she was in her boots and her fur coat. I was like, wow, that's so cool, you know. And the thing is, like, when people say she's a professor, she's supposed to, you know, like, people have this impression of what a professor should look like, how a professor should dress. So, you know, I'm sure you get that all the time.
So I never got that before I moved to Malaysia, but it's a very funny narrative, and I actually use that a little bit in my advantage, because I walk in a lot of rooms and I walk in a lot of meetings and I walk in a lot of talks, and the first reaction people have is like, you're a professor, but you don't look like a professor. And my question is all the time, well, what do you expect me to look? And probably they expect me to look a lot more like Andrew, and not in the sense that Andrew said that he's a little bit older. It's not that. I think we're the same age, Andrew. But I think there is a stereotype there of how you expect somebody professorial to look like. And the reason why I'm wearing this today is because I am trying to break this typecast. But I also want to say, it might be more context related, but I do have a lot of colleagues. I have a lot of colleagues at MIT. I have a lot of European colleagues who are very much like me, even more out there. So I think we're changing the narrative of what is a professor supposed to look like. But I do think, if you truly think about typecasts or stereotypes, they do exist for a reason. And it's because that's the most probably popular or visible image that you see of somebody. So when somebody looks surprisingly different than the prototype that you have in your head, you're surprised. So I actually, I tell people I'm an accidental professor, because all the typecast professors that I've seen up to that point were very foreign to my personality, to my own typecast, if you want. And I never thought that I'm going to become a professor, because most of the professors that I've seen in my life were dramatically older men who tended to be very lectorial, who tended to be extremely serious, slightly boring. Yeah, a little bit like Andrew puts his glasses on and he's like, right? And I was never inspired to be somebody like that. So I think there's something to be said there about the danger of having typecast, right, and being able to recognize yourself into something that you want to do, but you don't look like that. You don't look like the
right. I think it's also very interesting, because it sort of leads to, are we void of typecast, natural reaction, unconscious biases? Humanly, I believe we just like to put people in boxes. It just makes it easier for the brain to think, right? I mean, I'm just taking everything aside, but it's just how the human mind works. We want the path of least resistance. So we just like to put people in boxes for our own sanity, right? And understanding where it's come from. But this whole thing about unconscious bias, it was like, wow, even, you know, I would have unconscious bias. I was just sharing with Prof and Andrew the other day, how two women could be talking about, oh, you know, so-and-so, talking about another woman, who will be great for promotion. And then the two women will be saying, hey, no, but she's just given birth. I don't think she'll want this job. So the conversation ended before you even started with the other person, right? This unconscious bias that women even would have, and so sometimes understand that, you know, we have the best intentions, and so but we're unconscious about it. So I always try to talk about, there's a Malay word called niat, intention, right? So sometimes things can come out wrongly, but you always look at the person's intention, right? They mean, you know, and usually most people would not have bad intentions. You just have a problem in delivering it.
Yeah. So I agree with you, Freda, that it is a brain shortcut to put people in boxes. You know, can I eat it, or can it eat me? I.e., is it an opportunity or is it a threat? And
right.
Is this person a member of my tribe and therefore a little bit safer? So the interesting thing about, you know, Loredana and I have both lived in different countries. I know you have as well. You know, being English and then moving to Australia, then there was some prejudice about me being a POM. Then moving to Asia, a number of people thought I looked like a nightclub bouncer rather than a professor. So now that you think I look like a professor, but the bias is not restricted to any gender or any age. We are, you know, it's all very well to say, oh, you're biased, but we're all guilty of it. And I shared with you as we were preparing for this, that when I do a women in leadership program at Singapore Management University, the other facilitator is Dr. Tanvi Gautam, and you know, she's been running the program. All the women are comfortable, and then I walk in the room wearing a suit with that frown on, and before I say anything, I get Tanvi, or I ask the audience, what was the bias that you came up with? What are the first words that come to mind? And it's aggressive, alpha male, nightclub bouncer, et cetera, et cetera. And so whatever the positive intention I have to help, if somebody has already framed this, it can prevent the communication going to the next level. And your example of somebody being discounted from the opportunity because they'd had a baby before they'd even had the ability to articulate their willingness or their competency or their appropriateness for this is a huge issue. That first impression bias prevents any further thinking.
Right. I want to read this question from Cindy Neo, unless Prof, you want to add on to that. But it says here, I love the topic. There's always this imbalance between dress to impress and how a certain profession should dress like versus be yourself. So Cindy says, I try to balance both, dress comfortably, functionally, and maintain a professional image. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Andrew?
Go ahead, Andrew.
I remember first, so for the audience who doesn't work this out, I live in Singapore now. And one of my first clients in Singapore was Sentosa Leisure Group, who run Sentosa Island. And I turned up for the management meeting. I'm working with the CEO and all of his directs. And I turn up in the blue suit, white shirt, and the tie. And the CEO turns up in a Hawaiian shirt. He's ex-Disney. He's working at a leisure group. And he says to me, Andrew, if you want any respect around here, you're going to lose the suit and tie. Right? So the trick here is always context. Dress appropriate for the context, unless you want to make a huge statement. Right. So, you know, when I walk into a room, I'm always thinking about the executive presence, which is my own bias in terms of how I feel about myself. And I want to be able to connect with the audience. So it's always safer to be just slightly better dressed than the audience, just slightly. Because it's always easy to dress down. It's very hard to dress up.
Right. I agree. For example, you know, like, be professional. And like, you're right, like, dress a little bit better. And I work in radio. I would wear professional clothes, but I like color, right? I mean, why does it have to be a black suit, right? I love color. It's who I am. And even because I still have to go to the studio every other week, and no one's there, but I dress up. I guess I dress up for me, right? And makes me feel good. It makes me feel professional. I mean, the moment I'm working from home and I'm in my shorts, I feel that I'm not, you know, putting all of myself in. And put on makeup and, you know, to be that presence of mind, but I dress for me, firstly, and that's important. And then, just look up hard, I guess.
For me, I want to add a little bit to what Andrew said. And for me, it's getting dressed is an equation. It's actually a complicated algorithm. When women get dressed, it's a very complex algorithm. And I do take the context into consideration, but I always lead with my personality. What do I mean? I would never dress in a provocative manner because I'm not 25 anymore. But even if I have to go and meet with, my team at the central bank, I'm still gonna dress like myself, but I will contextualize it. I'm not gonna tone myself down, but I will adjust it to the context. And I also want to say, for those of you who are my friends on Instagram, I get a lot of comments about the way I get dressed in class and the things that I wear in class. And it's because I think that the first impression that somebody makes of you, in a way, it's the first thing they see. And I want to communicate right away that this is not going to be a conventional class activity. This is not going to be a conventional learning activity, and you're not going to get a conventional professor. And sometimes that is the instant message that you get. And I also think, at least in my case, I have a very serious profession, but I want to communicate very instantly that I don't take myself too seriously. And then there's one more thing I want to add to this. I don't know about Andrew's experience, but in my experience, the majority of my executive clients are men. People who take executive education courses are men, and the very large majority are much older than I am. So there's an interesting typecasting there, because you see a younger person who shows up maybe like this, and you're like, what is this, right? But I think in a way I want to block that box or to change that box. Andrew talked about it's easier to put people in boxes because that's an instant recognition. And I actually wanted to trouble that instant recognition and make them think a little bit like, I did not expect this. I wonder what this is going to be. So in my case, I play a little bit with it. It is a little bit on purpose, but it's very much driven by who I am. Thank you.
And I think that is from a self-leadership perspective, that is so important that you own it. When I'm talking about this with my classes, I'll often play a clip of Margaret Thatcher, the British Prime Minister, who was called the Iron Lady. And Margaret Thatcher was brilliant at she was being typecast, but she said, I'm going to own this. And there's a great clip of her speaking in the US. She's a guest of Ronald Reagan, and she says, here I am in my red chiffon gown with my face gently made up and my hair softly coiffured. Here I am, the Iron Lady of the Western world. So she fully embraced the label and said, here I am, come and meet me, right? And I think it's if you are going to stand out, you have to fully own it. If you're trying to fit in, but you don't really fit in, right, or you're trying to stand out, but you're not fully confident, it fails both ways. So either fit in and know you're fitting in, or stand out and own it. I remember when I was losing my hair. So I had lustrous locks of hair as a young man, and I had the whole Tom Hanks thing going on, the whole Wham thing when I was younger. And then, around 40, it started to get, I lost it in patches. I couldn't do the Jason Statham thing, with the perfect shave, of stubble, because it was just not even. And somebody called me out on this, and they said, Andrew, what are you doing? You're trying to hang on to your hair, and it looks like you've had a road accident, and you've had brain surgery. Embrace it. And I went, okay. So I got my Gillette Mark III, shaved my head, and I went back in, and this person said, you look so much better. And I went, okay, I'm going to embrace it.
Right.
And now if I show anybody a picture of me with hair, they go, that's not you, is it? Because this is who I don't apologize. I own it. And so whatever it is, fit in, don't fit in, but own it either way. I love what you both said. You dress for yourself first. And I think if anybody takes a message away from this session around typecasting is, if you are typecast, own it.
Yeah. You said something very interesting there, and I want to go to that question. If you look at Oprah Winfrey, right? Back before she became Oprah Winfrey, she was a Black woman not exactly, you know, your figure in that sense, right? And so imagine what she had to go through. And now, of course, everybody looks up to Oprah Winfrey, but I can imagine what she was trying to get through before she got really popular. So the whole thing about ageism, sexism, right? So this is Logita. What do you think about age, experiences, title in the situation? If you're the CEO that Andrew is talking about, I would think that maybe, oh, he's the CEO, so he can get away with anything he wants. Whereas, say someone working 3 years and wants a promotion, would that work?
I was always like this. I was this when I was a junior assistant. I was like this when I was a part-time secretary. I own myself ever since. And to be honest, I think at some point people get used to it. They just like, oh, there's an instant reaction, and it's just, oh, there's just Loredana. So I think obviously with power comes more confidence, if you want. And it's more of an external validation. It's like, well, she's the CEO, so she can do whatever she wants. But I don't really think that you should wait until you become somebody to be yourself. Oh, that's cool, huh?
Well,
that was.
Well, I would riff off that, Loredana. You won't become somebody unless you can project yourself into that position, right? As you know, the prefrontal cortex of our brain is the scenario planner. Unless we can see ourselves as the CEO, we will never become the CEO, right? Now, I coach both people wanting to get into senior leadership positions, and I'm fortunate I coach CEOs. And in fact, one of my clients is an Australian who moved to America. And he's constantly amused how people almost bow as he walks down the corridor, right? They expect him to, and that disconnect between, I mean, he knows he's fallible, but he said it's very intoxicating that I get that level of accolade. And I have, and you know, as his coach, I have full permission to stop him becoming an arrogant narcissist, because it can become self-perpetuating. When I coach people who want to be successful, sometimes they are waiting for the title to step in the position. Now, you didn't have that problem, Loredana, and I know you don't have it, Freda, but many people, they think, when I get the title, then I will be successful. Yeah. Well, firstly, you're unlikely to get the title unless you feel you deserve it in the first place. And secondly, the title in itself won't make any difference, right? You have to believe that you are deserving of that title, or you will self-destruct. Just as people who win the lottery are broke within 2 years of winning the money because they don't think they deserve it.
Love that. Love that.
Did you want to go through that other question? But I'll just talk as you that we had earlier on. But even within the organization, right, where I work in BFM, the boss is always in his polo neck shirt, right? That's who he is, right? I choose not to, right? I think I'm the only one that like would dress up because I like to, right? And it's just when guests come in, they feel that they're dealing with someone professionally, and so they will deal with me professionally because I'm dressed professionally. And so, like I said, it was not so, I don't, and he's not bothered with how we're dressed as well, but we should be, you know, proper in that sense that he says example. But it's also, like you say, own it, right? And I wasn't always like this. I wasn't always about color. I was a little bit I was a lot more conscious of how I looked in my earlier days, right? But it was just hence the book, you know, getting comfortable to who you are in your skin, and just, you know, and when you feel that that's you can be authentic and you can have real conversations with people if you know you're comfortable. And it happens within first, and then it will come out.
And I just want to remind everyone that Freda wrote a bestseller book called In Your Skin. And actually a lot of the topics that we cover in this webinar are covering in her book. You can contact her directly for the book. Freda did not ask me to sell this. Did Andrew asked me to sell this. So Andrew, do you want to talk a little bit?
It is important.
I said, do you want me to offer a resource to your people, right? So obviously, so I've written 2 books on self-leadership, and the 2016 one, which is a handbook plus 7 coaching sessions for mine, we normally sell for $97. I wanted to give it for free, but my back-end people said, can we at least cover the cost of hosting? So for just $7, you get 7 weeks of pre-recorded coaching plus a download of this book, which was a bestseller on Amazon. And you just go to selfleadership.com /SLA for Self Leadership Accelerator. That's what that's short for. So if anything I've spoken about, you say, I want to own that a bit more, there are some lessons and some coaching for you there.
Right.
Thank you. Actually,
I want to go.
I would
Sorry,
like to ask, just type your links in this chat box in case.
I will certainly do that for you. I will type that in right now.
I think the last question we had was like, what are some ways we can be more aware and how can we overcome this? And I think, you know, if there are some tips that people can get away, will learn from, and so that they're more self-aware when, you know, whether it's typecast on them or whether they're putting their typecast on people. Some of the ways, Andrew, I know you deal a lot with women in management, so maybe there's some suggestions that you have.
Well, we've really covered the first one, which is accepting yourself. And,
right.
You know, because when the interesting thing is with self-awareness and self-acceptance, the more accepting we are of ourselves, the more accepting we are of others. You know, I noticed personally in the beginning of this lockdown and the stress, etc., when I was focused on myself, I was much more snippy and judgmental of other people. But when I got that out of, I recognized that, got that out of the way, I was able to tap back into unconditional positive regard. And that is a phrase from a psychologist from the 1950s, Carl Rogers. When we believe in people and the best in people, then we see past the gender, the age, etc., and we connect with the individual. Right. I think we've all had the experience of connecting with somebody and going, oh, that's not who I thought you were initially. And that's the truth for everybody. Everybody has a story. How many times, you know, when you were struggling with something in your life, somebody misjudged you and you go, well, if only they knew what I was dealing with.
Right.
Everybody we connect with, we don't know what their story is. We don't know what they're dealing with, whether they're a single parent, whether they're struggling financially or with health or, you know, with some sort of social issue. We don't know. So having an unconditional positive regard for self, accept that you're not perfect, you are who you are, the acceptance of that, the more accepting of ourselves, the more accepting we are of other people. We get to see past it so much quicker. So always with self-leadership, it starts with self. Accept yourself, and it's so much easier to accept other people. Realize that you're not perfect, you're work in progress, and therefore you can accept other people. If you're operating from some kind of false frame that you have reached perfection, nobody's going to meet that. And you're going to judge everybody. And that's going to be a very lonely place to live. I read a book many years ago that said, you know, here's the test to see if you've reached enlightenment. If you're still here, you haven't. Right? So every day I learn something new. Every day I make a mistake. I have a wife to remind me of that. And so in accepting that I'm work in progress, but I'm always improving, I can recognize other people when they make mistakes or, you know, they're coming from a different tribe. I'm less threatened by that because that's humanity.
That was very nice, Andrew. That was really, really deep. You took it to church several times.
Hallelujah, brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
Hallelujah. Okay, so something one of my mentors taught me, and it's just very simple rules, right? I mean, when I look at someone, I put a 10 on their forehead. And when I put a 10 on your forehead, I just treat you with respect. And and because you're a 10 in my eyes, right? And you try to connect with a person on a heart-to-heart level. And there are sometimes things that you say that aren't right, but when the person knows that you come from a good place, people are more willing and more accepting, right? So that's, first of all, just look at everybody with a 10. And you know, they can prove themselves wrong, right? But I would like to, you know, look at a person with a 10, talk to them heart to heart, and you don't see us, then you don't look at all what's on the exterior. And that's, you know, the basis, I think, of dealing. And these things will still come about, right? These stereotypes will still come about. But I think you just consciously, what I do is just look at a person as a 10. I don't care what race, what color, what age, whatever. Just treat everybody with a 10. See that 10 on the forehead.
You know, I'm a professor and I don't do that, Freda. I should learn that from you. I have to say, I have a hard time checking myself in because I'm a very fast person, and speed goes in both ways, right? I tend to make instant connections, and I also tend to make instant judgments. So I find myself guilty many times of checking myself in a So the other day I was telling Freda, I was listening to a YouTube video as I was doing something in the house, and they were introducing a new character, the chief. This is a cooking show, because that's what I do with my life. I watch cooking shows and cat shows, and they were introducing a new character, the chief police officer of some UK district. And when the character started talking, I couldn't see it. She was a woman, and I was like, "Oh, that." Okay, I did not expect that. And then the second later, I was like, oh my God, you're such a bitch. Why did you expect that to be a guy? But in my brain, I think because I'm so used to these boxes, and it's so instant to make this connection that, of course, the chief police officer or the detective is going to be a guy, because that's what I see most of the times. So I think it's a lot of effort. And I think there's a lot of self-awareness, like both of you said, but there's also a lot of self-checking, right? When you do something that it's not within the beautiful 10 that Freda talked about, react to it immediately and ask yourself, why do I do that? Why did I assume instantly that this would be a man or a woman, or that I expect you to look like this or behave like this? And this brings us into a question: how do you overcome your biases and embrace everybody into this human circle? First of all, I don't want to embrace everybody into this human circle. One of the things that I learned during COVID, that I don't want to embrace people. And also, yeah, you heard me say this all the time, that I really don't like people that much. Andrew, after I finish writing my current book on entrepreneurship, I'm going to write a book. It's called I Hate People and Other Management Lessons. If you want to write a foreword to that, let me know. But I have a feeling that you like people.
No, actually, no. You see, I wrote a book on self-leadership because I needed the self-leadership myself. I think we always write about that which we need to learn. No, I'm with you. I'm quick to judge. The reason I shared with that is, I'm not saying I always manage unconditional positive regard. I don't. And I shared with you that, the moment things happen, it's so easy to be judgmental. But I know, at 58 years old, I know it's cost me. I know that there's a price to being judgmental, because if I judge them, they judge me back, right? So I don't know whether I can go all the way with you, Freda, to go to a 10, because I think there's a danger to naivety that because otherwise you're going to give your money to everybody. Some Nigerian prince is offering to help you out financially. You might find that you're going to lose your money. Now, I've suddenly been prejudiced against Nigeria and anybody from Nigeria. I'm just referring to a stereotypical.
Okay.
I'm referring to a stereotypical internet scam. Okay, so I would start at a 7 and look to be impressed, or subtract points if somebody. So you're starting at a 10. I'm impressed. I would start at a 7 or an 8 and hope to be impressed. You're starting at a 3. I think 3 is a little cynical. You're going to be tough. You're going to be tough to build a relationship with at 3.
But when I started at 10, right? I mean, there's also 3 types of people. There's the wise, the foolish, and the evil, right? And you also then a biblical saying is to be innocent as a dove, but wise as a serpent, right? So you be innocent, be just see the good in people, but don't be dumb about things at the same time. Right? That's where the subtraction happens.
I love the Middle Eastern expression: trust in Allah, but tie up your camel.
Yeah. Great, right? Between your 7, my 3, and Freda's 10, we actually have a 5. So we have a
This is an average conversation.
I think you need to check your statistics there.
We have a couple more questions. Maybe it's easy to be judgmental because we get tired, right?
Yeah.
Maybe we all hate people because
we're worn out.
I know I am.
Yeah.
Tell you made me like a little bit more people because I didn't have to interact with so many. Geraldine says maybe we don't have any expectations at all.
Yeah, but that's a nice aspiration, but it's very hard to do, because the way the brain works is it starts with a model and tries to fit the model, right? So to have, if we had 0 expectations, we couldn't operate. We have a mental map or a schema, and if we're with good feedback, we're constantly updating that mental map or schema to see if it's functional. So it would be nice to expect nothing of anybody, but that's hard because your limbic system, your reptile brain, is constantly looking for threat or opportunity. If you had no expectation, you would have no expectation of threat and no expectation of opportunity. So I think it's a nice idea. I just don't think it's pragmatic.
Wow, such wise words.
I know.
So, we're sitting in silence, just.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Processing. I had the expectation that I was supposed to contribute some wisdom.
Well,
you did your part.
You're the only the two of us. We thought we're here just to have fun.
Okay, well, I apologize. So I had the wrong expectation. So now I just need to party on, right? So.
Yeah. So one other question: hiring bias. Yes, sometimes a professional role is built by typecasting. Our hiring manager wants someone who fits the company culture. Sometimes it works, and I guess sometimes it don't. And you don't know, right? I mean, when you say someone wants to fit into the company culture, until they come in, sometimes you really can't tell, not from the way they dress, right? And the danger with that as well, understanding culture, but also understanding that if you only hire people who are like you, then there is no diversity in the organization as well, right? So that's the danger with hiring people who you think will fit into the culture. Right, and to me, culture are values, right? Is it integrity that runs through a person? These are the things that underlies the values. It's not the, do we have the beanbag? I don't think that's the company culture, in my opinion.
And I also think it's very important to look at how you define the process of hiring somebody, right? If you follow a very, very simplistic, pre-planned programmatic process, then you're going to end up hiring the same people. But if you have a very inclusive, if you have a slightly unconventional process, people who interview at ASB, and especially who interview with me or with my team, they leave the interview and they're like, what is this? I never expected anything like this in my life, because we're trying to make so different. So we give you a little bit of a sample of what the reality of working at ASB is like. So you don't have this dichotomy between the type of interview and then the reality of working with us, right? So we want to show you right from the beginning that we are unconventional, we are very different. You better get this right away, so when you join us, you don't have a cultural shock of like, oh my God, what did I end up doing?
Okay, do we have time for one last question?
Well, can I have one last comment on that?
Oh yeah, no, you can have more than one. Okay, go on.
Okay. So I didn't get a word in edgeways, and I knew this would be dangerous because typecasting, getting on a show with two women and being the only guy. So I'm joking.
Poor thing.
You said to have fun. You said to have fun. All right. Okay. So look, I think you make a really important point. It is the process of hiring. We clearly know that interview-based hiring, without a structured process, is massively biased. Right. So firstly, there's a gender bias on your name, on the application,
racial,
if there's photographs, so we know that the unstructured interview is incredibly biased and doesn't work. And yet it's happening all over the world. Yeah. Now, the opposite of that is to go full AI, and some organization, I'm not going to drop any names here. One of the major consulting companies, one of the huge fast-moving goods, etc., companies has gone full AI on this, and then that's the other way to take out any bias. But then the question is, was there bias already built into the algorithm in terms of which?
Right.
The other piece for this, I coached a guy who really did not have a gender or nationality filter. Really interesting guy. When I met him, I had a bias because his name seemed Indian and he was very white. And so I went, oh, okay, so that was interesting. I had that bias. Then I discovered he was Dutch by birth, spoke French, German, English, was educated in the United States and in Africa because his parents were diplomats. And then when he finally went to school, he was between London, Paris, and his first job was in Thailand. And he works for a multinational organization, and he builds the best teams because he only looks for competency. And if, so obviously he builds the culture and the value alignment, but he looks for that competency. And what we're seeing, and the comment I want to make right now is leadership, which is an area obviously I spend a lot of time in. Around the world, we are seeing a huge problem with leadership because we have hired leaders on a bias of confidence. And we've typically hired men because men project confidence more than women because we are less perfectionist. So we have hired leaders across the world, both organizationally and politically, on confidence. And now we're hitting a crisis. They're being tested on competence.
Right.
And we have not hired for competence, we've hired for confidence. And that is a massive piece of typecasting. And so the issue is when I'm speaking to women about stepping up into leadership, they say, what do we need to do? And in the hiring process, the question is not, should we make it easier for women? We should make it harder for men. We should be checking, did they have the competence as well as the confidence? Because often the women have the competence, but haven't projected the confidence. And I know we weren't going to talk about COVID, but globally, the best national responses have been by women, leaders, not by men, at which point I should now run away because the chat box is going to explode.
No, but it's true. I mean, like if you look at what's been happening in the countries that are led by women have handled the situation a lot better. I mean, and it's again, you know, equality, right? It's not just too many of one sort. This is a comment here by Lily. He says, judgment comes from our experience. We use as a reference point, which we make our assumptions. Unlearning the bias is difficult. Changing views is a good way to appreciate diversity. Political, cultural, religious views affects our worldview of people, right? And you know, when this course in NLP, we all come with our own maps of the world, depending on where we're raised, how we're educated, how we, you know, the people that, you know, influences growing up and all that. So, I mean, this was a realization when I went to Australia to study years ago. And, you know, like in Malaysia, because we have the different nationalities and we say, oh, you know, and we say, hey, what race are you, right? And it doesn't come from a point of judgment. It just comes from a point of interest. Like they'll look at me and say, oh, I'm from Sarawak. And then, you know, this whole conversation ensues, right? When I asked someone that in Australia, there's like, oh my God. And I was like, oh, okay. And it didn't come from a point of, it's just interesting conversation, right? But understanding how the world works and, you know, making sure we don't ask these sensitive questions. So now I don't ask a person's race, but I'll just say, so what's your cultural heritage? You know, and it just sounds.
Yeah.
In California, you can't even ask a woman if she's married.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, in a workplace scenario,
Right.
you can't ask a woman if she's married, right? So this is taking it so far to the extreme that people are sensitive about upsetting anybody.
Right.
So there has to be a middle ground around this, because your ethnicity, if it was your heritage of how you've grown up, does indicate some certain belief systems, right? It is curious. When my children were born in Singapore, I went and registered the birth, and it's the same thing in Singapore. They gave me an arrival card for my children, right? And I said, what's this? And they said, well, your children have arrived in Singapore. And I said, what? And yes. The form had, you know, name, and it had vessel, right? Where you put, you know, QF114 or SQ230 or whatever. So having a PhD in sarcasm, I wrote my wife's uterus. But then once the arrival card, they asked, what race is the child? And I said, well, human race, of course. Okay. And they said, well, that's not on the drop-down menu, right? So then I had to go up and ask the mother of my children, who was obviously no longer my wife, who I had met in Australia, who had an Australian passport. I said, what race are you? Now, she'd had a C-section, so she was a bit groggy. And she said, what? I said, what race are you? She said, what? I said, it's for a form. And she said, oh, if it's for a form, you say Sino-Kadazan. Because her mother was Indian Chinese from Kuala Lumpur, and her father was Kadazan from East Malaysia. So on my kids' Singaporean ICs, it has Sino-Kadazan Caucasian. And I said to the lady, Sino-Kadazan Caucasian, we're in a hospital. Is that a disease? Can you cure it?
Yeah, I think we're exaggerating. There was one question.
Okay. one last question. Yeah, we're enjoying ourselves too much. This
You
has to
told me to
stop.
have fun. You told me to have fun.
No,
So.
no, no, in the sense that we're running out of time. But to be honest, if people want to leave, we're still going to talk. It's not like you
Yeah,
pay
yeah.
for.
So, interesting question from Geraldine. Someone could project confidence but not have the essence for leadership. Any comments?
I think
I already commented on that.
get to name that. One of the things I want to add to this, one of the things that I'm getting a lot of comments about is like, how can you be so confident? Because apparently I project a lot of confidence. And I find the question to be a little bit bizarre because like, and again, it's because we don't typecast women as being very confident. And I always say, I'm only confident when I'm competent, in the sense that when I go in front of an audience or on a stage or when I talk to people and I come off very confidently, is because I know that I put 1,000 hours in preparing for that talk or preparing for that class or preparing for that meeting. So I'm never confident unless I'm competent. However, Geraldine and Andrew talked about this, is you have to be careful when that confidence is full of bullshit. And we have a lot of leaders of very, very large nations around the world. I'm not going to say who, but it might sound like America, that project a lot of confidence, but they might not have a lot of competence. So we have to check them. We have to check them and see, did that confidence that was projected, is it matched to what they are doing? So Freda, we have a question that we got from the registrars. Did you want to a little bit of an
I don't have, wait, I'm going to look at my phone. Wait a minute.
All right, if I'll read it. It was a little bit a stereotype that comes with women of a certain look. So what do you do if you sort of fit into a typecast of either being very blonde or looking a little bit ditzy or looking a little bit, if you think about it, it's very much the movie Legally Blonde. I think the reason why that movie was so successful is because it took a big stereotype of women who look a specific type, but they are not actually part of that type. So do you have any advice for people who look a certain type, but they're actually not that type? So the question came from a woman, Andrew, but I think we can expand it to more. I think this is the stereotype of guys who look like geeks or, men like what did you say, that they thought they were a club bouncer, right, Andrew? So what do we do when we fit a physical typecast or a stereotype, but actually we're nothing like that?
So the question's for me. Okay, so one of the things I've learned as a man who does women in leadership programs or women in the workplace programs is that it's not appropriate for me to ever comment on how a woman looks. However, understanding that how any gender looks creates, and we've already talked this, it creates a reaction, right? So people put you in a box. And if you realize that people are putting you in a particular box, you've got a couple of choices. You either, adapt your look to fit in, and I covered this earlier, or you own it and you call it, right? When I worked in, when I first started working in Singapore, whoever was hiring me goes, we don't want you to intimidate the group. And I'm like, well, why would I intimidate the group? What are they trying to tell me here? And so I realized that because I was a confident white guy talking to a predominantly Asian group, that the best thing I could do was put the fish on the table. And what I mean by that is if a fish is under the table, we don't know it's there, it's going to stink. If we put the fish on the table, we can cook that fish, we can eat it. So I would come out and I'd say, look, I've been told I look like a nightclub bouncer. Really, that's not who I am. And just give them here's why I'm here. Here's my positive intention. And, and if I could, if I learned to speak some Chinese and, in Malaysia, I speak some Bahasa, in Indonesia, the same. And I say something to say, I give people enough to say, here's who I am, and here's how I'm like you. So if I can own myself and make that connection to where they're coming from, then we have the communication. Because I'm recognizing their brain is going, is this person a threat to me? And so for me to be, Lorena, we're both educators. If they feel I'm a threat, then their minds are not going to be open to be educated by me. So I show some way that I'm like them, and possibly a fallibility story as well, right? That's how I connect. So for this person who is blonde and ditzy, if you are ditzy, own it, right? But if you are competent, go, hey, you know, you may think I look stupid, but let me quote you some nuclear physics or whatever her competency is.
Right.
I have a similar reaction to Andrew. So in my case, I get this a lot, that I'm very intimidating. I tell people all the time, nobody can intimidate you unless you give me the power to do so, right? I mean, yes, if I'm a tiger or if I'm a lion, then you should feel intimidated. But if I'm a person and you feel intimidated, it could be that I do come off very strongly, and I'm tall also. You can't really see because I'm sitting on the couch. I'm also tall, but don't give somebody the power to intimidate you. But I also do what Andrew says. I do this a lot. I try to find a human component. I try to make fun of myself. I usually give people a couple of minutes in the room to be like, and I make very obvious statements like, all right, so now that you bask into my glory and to my beautifulness, let me also tell you that I'm smart, but don't get too intimidated. I'm going to play with this. So I think it helps a lot to humanize yourself, to not take yourself a little bit too seriously, to find that connection. Like even today, Andrew tried to come up with a few words in one of the Latin languages that might be common to mine. So I think this attempt of trying, and this goes back to what Freda said, why do we ask people where you're from? Why do we ask people what race you are? It's an attempt to try to connect with you on a box, and this time I want to use it in a positive way, on a box that you recognize, right? So if you ask somebody, what race are you? And if you assume the 10, like Freda does, maybe it's an attempt of saying, do we have something in common? Maybe by asking somebody, what religion are you? A lot of people ask me here if I'm Christian. I don't think it's a judging question. I think it's an attempt to try to build a relationship that otherwise is not very obvious, right? When people ask me where I'm from, I'm like, well, I'm from Bukit Bintang, I'm actually now from Bukit Tungku. So that's my attempt of trying to say, I'm with you.
Right.
So I love what Freda said about the 10. I do think that we should aim to believe a little bit more that some of the questions come from a very good place. Some of the questions come from an attempt to try to build a relationship or a network or an instant connection that otherwise you have a hard time doing it.
Right. And humor, I mean, humor really helps, you know, like when people come to the studio, they get nervous, right? You get this big mic in your face. It's not an everyday thing for everyone. So I always, you know, with the joke, I always say, you know, thousands have lost their radio virginity to me. And then instantly they laugh. And the moment they laugh, everybody's sort of like, you know, I've connected with you, we've made a joke. And I think like laughter, that sort of just gets everybody sort of like, okay.
Freda, you were my first.
You see, thousands.
Laughter. I mean, laughter in itself, if you've got laughter, as we know, I mean, there's studies on the psychology and physiology of laughter. Laughter is a relaxation of tension, right? So a comedian creates a premise and then suddenly there's a change in that premise, and as that stress is created and then released, we laugh. And I think if we've made people laugh, firstly, it's reduced the tension, and secondly, it has created that bridge, that humanity.
All right. Okay. We've come to the end, or do we still want to address one more question? Do you want to address the question? This is from Sarah. I had a past boss recently tell me that if others feel I'm pushy or too confident, it can often be because they're intimidated, but not necessarily because it's a true judgment. If a person is showing confidence about something they're sure about, like Prof referred to, that's not actually being prideful or having too much ego. Appreciate the conversation. Okay, thank you. I think on that note, we just want to thank Andrew for his time here with us on a Friday afternoon. You can finish your tea and move on to other liquids.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I've got a couple of more meetings before I can imbibe. But
okay, and of course you can get hold of Andrew, right? Yeah, you can, and it's Brian with a T at the end. Bryant.
Andrew, yes, Andrew, Bryant.
Right. What's your preferred mode of getting your website and LinkedIn, I guess?
Yeah, so LinkedIn is easy. It's easy to find me on Andrew Bryant. The website is selfleadership.com. And the offer to your listeners is selfleadership.com/SLA. So, and we've got lots of stuff around building confidence on that. So It's been my pleasure. Thank you for the invitation. Enjoy your weekends and talk soon.
Pleasure. We'll just talk about next week for a short while. Next week, we're talking about the hustle. I guess all of us have to hustle, especially right now with COVID. And the guest that we've got for next week, I'll just show you a slide. Her name is Yu Yi.
I'm trying, Freda, that my
Okay,
laptop
no
got
worries.
frozen.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So Yu Yi is from Singapore as well. She's actually Indonesian Chinese. She used to be in broadcast with MediaCorp. She's now on her own, and she's also a travel content creator, which would be interesting to find out what she's going to be doing now. You know, with what's happening. So another guest from across the seas. So that's happening next week. Have a good weekend, everybody. May 4th could be different. May the 4th be